finalizing Brexit. The original Brexit referendum that passed in June 2016 pitted populists against the establishment, with banks funneling huge amounts of money to oppose the referendum, which was cast as a measure to return taxes and power to local British citizens while restoring the sovereignty of the UK's borders against what was cast as unfair and uncontrolled migration. But the politics of the deal have shifted over time, with hardliners gaining power within Tory leadership and demanding a radical break from the EU, as we saw with Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister, Theresa May, who was originally not very thrilled with the referendum, having to actually vote for it and having to push for it and go to Brussels to try and get a referendum out there. She kind of got the raw end of that deal. But now, of course, obviously Johnson is in charge. Corporate lobbyists now see an opportunity to use Johnson's proposed swift exit from the EU as a way to forge bilateral trade deals, including one between the US and UK, which would outsource local authority to rules set by an array of international business interests. So pretty much taking away the power from the people, as it was supposed to be given back to them with this deal, and giving it to private companies, especially with the NHS. A wide range of industries are primed to take advantage of the deal, however, to evade EU consumer safeguards and drug pricing rules. Representatives from American pork to Silicon Valley and everything in between have been trying to influence this negotiation. So it's not just the NHS here. Departing the EU could mean that British consumers would no longer be protected by broad EU-wide regulations on chemicals, food, and cosmetics, among other products. Several international corporate groups have pushed to ensure that, in the extent of Brexit, such safeguards are abandoned in exchange for a regulatory standard that conforms to the norms of the U.S. So it's like, you're playing by our rules now. If you want to do a deal with the U.S., you are playing by our crappy standards. Consultants working directly on the Brexit deal in London and in Washington, D.C. have asked to limit the ability of British regulators to set the price for pharmaceutical drugs, lift safety restrictions on pesticides and agricultural products, and constrain the ability for the UK to enact its own data privacy laws. In January, a lengthy hearing hosted by trade officials from both countries provided a forum in D.C. for industry to lay out its agenda on what should happen after Brexit. The Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, the lobby group that represents the largest drug makers in the world, insisted that any UK-US deal must recognize that the prices of medicine should be based on a variety of value criteria. So pretty much the idea that the prices will not be negotiated. The prices are going to go up significantly. They're not going to be like NHS prices. They're going to be a lot more like U.S. prices, which are, as we know very, very well here in the U.S., absolutely awful. Pharma called for changes in the way the UK's National Health Service sets price controls through comparative effectiveness research. That's how they do it there, to try and keep the prices down in an effort to control the cost of drugs using clinical research. The Biotechnology Innovation Organization, a lobby group for the biopharmaceutical industry, made similar demands in a letter to trade officials in the UK, calling to do more in shouldering a fair share of the cost of innovation. Bio suggests that in order to ensure a fair treatment for drug makers, companies should have to petition an independent body to overrule decisions made by the NHS. So pretty much that quote-unquote independent body is going to have control of the U.S. and have the ability to really raise the prices of drugs, raise the prices for everyday British people. So like that's probably something that they're not going to be too happy about. But the media has really been able to kind of keep this under wraps. At the hearing, Craig Thorne, a lobbyist representing the U.S. National Pork Producers Council, told the Trump administration that the proposed U.S.-UK deal presents a historic opportunity, citing his client's desire to continue trade with the EU by evading EU restrictions on certain feed additives and antibiotics used widely on American pork. Similarly, Floyd Gabler, a representative from the U.S. Grains Council, said that the deal provides a window for American agriculture to avoid EU restrictions on pesticides that have been or will soon be banned. Silicon Valley similarly views Brexit as a chance to bypass EU-wide limits on data collection or even new UK-based rules. Several technology lobbyists have pushed to provide trade provisions between the U.S. and the U.K. that outlaw so-called localization requirements. some regulators have looked at the need for technology firms to store consumer data in local servers to ensure that it's not resold or abused every way. So pretty much the point is that every regulation that the EU has put on, and some of these regulations are incredibly well liked. For example, the ones that kept drug prices from spiraling absolutely out of control. That little thing, and keeping everyday Americans alive, that was kind of probably everyday English people alive. That would be not Americans. We would love to have that kind of protection in America, but these kind of protections were so important to like the basic standard that they have in England. Like that is what they those regulations, they keep them healthy in more ways than one, and they're things that I think they've come to expect. And these are all things that are under threat if Boris Johnson retakes number 10 Downing Street this Thursday. Silicon Valley similarly views, again, Brexit as a chance to bypass these EU-wide limits. Other corporate demands by U.S.-based groups are spelled out in a series of requests and testimony made by lobbyists before the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the federal agency entrusted with negotiating trade deals. Federal lobbying disclosures show a number of interests, including Cargill, IBM, Koch Industries, the Motion Picture Association of America, the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association, Ford Motor, the National Association of Manufacturers, and Salesforce have all lobbied on the potential bilateral UK trade deal in recent months. It's not just U.S.-based interest groups that are seeking to retool corporate standards through a hard Brexit. The Institute of Economic Affairs, a major conservative think tank in London, has met repeatedly with Conservative Party leaders and American officials to shape a new U.S.-UK deal that mirrors the demands of industry groups. So it's very likely if England gives back the Conservatives power to do a hard Brexit, get Brexit done, and get this get the bilateral trade deals done, all that stuff, get reset after Brexit happens, it's very, very likely that all the protections, all the things they enjoy, both with the NHS and through EU regulations, will just go straight to the control of corporations, as Boris Johnson and the Conservatives are proudly funded, I might add, by corporations. So that is the reality of the situation there. All right, do want to turn to Labour and its manifesto. So when Jeremy Corbyn launched the Labour manifesto in Birmingham last month, he referred to it as a manifesto for hope. If you live in the UK in 2019 and earn less than, say, $80,000 a year, then hope must feel in a little bit short supply. A decade of Tory rule has seen a fall in living standards through the implementation of a destructive and often deadly program of austerity. The bungled aftermath of the Brexit referendum has helped give power to the Tory far right. Their victory at the upcoming election directly threatens the future of the NHS and the environment, and as we talked about, pretty much every basic consumer protection that the people of the UK have come to expect since their time in the EU. Meanwhile, the left-wing alternative represented by Corbyn has been constantly monstered in both broadcast and print media, despite the transparently monstrous figures who comprise the current Tory government. And trust me, they are all over the place. So that is it was in the last election in 2017. Take back here to the Labour Party, which had been half expecting a heavy defeat, began to surge in the polls over the course of the campaign and ultimately succeeded in depriving the Tories of their majority. A sudden outburst of hope, driven by a grassroots activist, conquered the dominant narrative of despair. Hope became a pretty powerful message for Labour to be running on. If nothing else, it contrasts strongly with what's on offer from the Tories, whose most ambitious policy, beyond the vacuous promise to quote-unquote get Brexit done, something they failed to do for more than 3 years in office, let me just remind you, is the launch of a $2 billion pothole fund to help fix the country's horribly maintained roads. The fund is, again, apparently only sufficient to fill 1/5 of the potholes. So, that's where we're at with ambition of the Tories. Just please keep things the same. Please do not let him in. I would suck for all our billionaire friends. The Tories are the party of cynicism that has become dominant in British politics for decades, a cynicism that allows people like Boris Johnson to get away with constantly lying and plotting to make people's lives worse, relying on a belief that all politicians are the same and all we can ever do is grimly joke about them. For the cynic, things aren't just aren't possible. They're a childish delusion that must be purged from any possibility of our public imagination. The cynicism is thus closely related to what Mark Fisher called capitalist realism. The widespread sense that not only is capitalism the only viable political and economic system, but it's also now impossible to even imagine a coherent alternative to it. One way of viewing such cynicism is a sort of defense mechanism. The cynic is never really disappointed in their hopes, because any hopes they once possessed have already been disavowed by the definition of the name. This disenchantment extends across much of British society, and is certainly pervasive among mainstream journalists. Take, for example, the Sky News anchor's incredulous response to the Labour Manifesto's use of poverty. Quote, "You can cut all the flowers, but you cannot keep the spring from coming in which he appears to deny even the possibility of the metaphor. Saying, quote, sounds good, but isn't it totally gobbledygook? And then just someone goes, it's a metaphor at him. One, it's not presented as such. Two, it isn't very good because it lacks logical consistency and is merely a sentimental misassociation. It's like, yeah, ending poverty, that's sentimental. It would be nice if it happened. You know what I'm saying? Hey, like, it'd be pretty cool. Like, That's where we're at with the media in England right now. Trust me, we'll get to it. Things are pretty dark. But I do want to move now on to an interesting profile that was in the New York Times yesterday about the small town of Shirebrook, England, where there used to be a mine at the edge of this small town. Now there's only a warehouse. The mine provides coal that powered the country. The warehouse stores tracksuits. The mine men a job for life. The warehouse offers mostly temporary work for the lowest legal wage. Holiday factories sound familiar? Right for a populist message? What Jeremy Corbyn's offering? Just saying. Shirebrook was the third stop in a 900-mile journey that the author of this, Patrick Kingsley, made through Britain last month. I was trying to make a sense of a splintered country in the run-up to the December 12th general election. The outside world typically sees Britain through affluence and the cosmopolitanism of London, but other than one quick stop there, I went elsewhere looking for people beyond the capital's glare. Everywhere I went, it felt as if the country was coming unbound, for all sorts of reasons, all sorts of people, Leavers, Remainers, blue and white collar, Jews and Muslims, English, North Irish, Scottish and Welsh, felt alienated and unmoored. At times, I was reminded that electoral politics were far removed from many people's priorities, which range from simply making a living to fighting global warming. There's no Brexit on a dead planet, said Lauren MacDonald, a Glasgow student who recently quit college to mobilize against climate change. I mean, yeah, I think that's what makes Labour's manifesto here that we were just talking about so powerful, because it just doesn't talk about Brexit. It has bold, ambitious plans, industrial Green New Deal for the climate, very similar to the Green New Deal that we see here. That's a big part of their plan. They're focusing on creating a new and pretty pervasive worldview that is going to be set up for the future. That's something that just is on its face, no matter what you think about the Conservative Party, just not existing. Again and again, though, people come back to the politics of nationalism, austerity, and economic alienation. And in Shirebrook and beyond, frustrations were rooted in Brexit. So, since the surrounding constituency was formed in 1950, its mostly working-class residents have always elected a Labour lawmaker. Then came the 2016 Brexit referendum, in which 7 in 10 local voters supported Britain's departure from the EU. Many are now furious the country still hasn't left. Every time you turn on the television, it's all Brexit, said Kevin Cann, a Shirebrook resident and former miner who voted to leave. This is one of my favorite British expressions. But now it should have been done and dusted. Come on, mate. The British Prime Minister, a pro-Brexit conservative, hopes to turn his minority government into a majority by capitalizing on that frustration. For the first time ever, that could tip Shirebrook's seat to Conservatives, a party once detested in mining constituencies like this one. Miners are now like, oh, Boris, says Alan Gascoigne, who once headed a mines union branch and now runs a former miner